All right, welcome everybody. I'm Jan Byers. I'm the vice president of the local chapter. Normally Arlie Montalvo takes this role and is much better at it than I am, but I'm filling in because she has a family situation. So first of all, thank you for showing up today. I know everybody's eager to find out how to replace their lawns with something else, something better, and preferably something native. Before we get started, I just want to let everybody know that next month our meeting will be on May 17th, and it's going to start at 11 instead of 10 because the speaker is coming in from Northern California and its flight isn't quite, we don't want to risk him not getting here on time. So remember, it starts at 11. And it will be Nick Jensen, who's the CNPS Conservation Director, telling us how to use the CNPS Conservation Toolkit and the beautiful book, Wildflowers of California. He'll be talking about that as well. So it should be a really great program, and I hope everybody can be here. On June 21st, we're having a field trip meeting. The program will be at Sky Park Heaps Peak Arboretum with a tour of restoration sites up there. So native plant restoration starting at 10 a.m. and Gina Richmond will be leading that tour. So I know you might have to get going a bit early to get up there by 10, but it should be a really great program. So both of those coming up are going to be outstanding. Today we have, I'm terrible with names here, Denise Mitchell, who is going to talk about how to replace your lawn with native plants. Her title is "It's the End of the Lawn as We Know It, and I Feel Fine." She came to love California native plants while working on her master's thesis at UCR and completed that a few years ago. And now spends her time teaching and educating people about the wonders of native plants. She could probably tell you a little bit more about herself. So I will hand it over to Denise.
Good morning. Thank you, Jan, for that introduction. And thank you to the chapter for inviting me today to speak. And so I do want to, I hope that my presentation, if there's anybody here or online that is considering replacing their lawn, that my presentation may help inspire you or give you some ideas. But I'm also about 2 years into my project, which isn't very long. So I'm also hoping if there's anybody that has a, veteran landscape, so to speak, they can also give me suggestions and give me kind of a preview of coming events, right? So I hope that both of those things can happen today, this morning. I do want to share with you that I have my mom and my sister are at home. Hopefully they figured the technology out, watching the presentation, and just mentioned that my mom is 6 days shy of her 90th birthday. So pretty cool. And also, I do have to credit my mom somewhat with my love of nature. She, you see, when I was growing up, in order to earn my allowance, I was required to pull weeds for at least an hour. So thanks, Mom. And yeah. And my sister, on the other hand, she's a writer and a published poet. And of course, she earned her allowance by reading novels. So, there you go. So great parenting. So we're going to go ahead and get started. This is a little bit new, this format, so bear with me. Okay, so just a brief introduction, as Jan said, that I really came to love native plants when I was working on my thesis for UC Riverside. And you can see here 3 different photos of me. Should I? Don't you love technology? It's just the best. And so I love that I have help.
Just keep talking.
Okay, so so you can see here 3 different field sites that I went to during this time. On the left there, that is San Jacinto Mountains in Idlewild. So that's a mixed coniferous forest. And then up above, that's in Palm Desert at the Deep Void Canyon Research Center. And then over on the right is the Santa Margarita Ecological Reserve, which is all the chaparral shrubs. So I really enjoyed my time in those places. And so I finished up my thesis in 2021 and made kind of a bold move professionally, decided to retire from my 25-year career as a science teacher, but also decided to personally make a change and moved from Riverside, where I grew up for most of my life, down to Fallbrook. And mainly, and you'll get to know my dog, just heads up, during this presentation, I was looking for a home that had a large backyard because I have a large dog and he needed the room and I wanted him to get up to a full run and so forth. So I landed here in Fallbrook, and this is what I had. And of course, it's beautiful, it's gorgeous, it's, you know, lush. I should mention that the previous owner did own his own irrigation company. So he had the sprinklers on for many settings and for long periods of time. And I loved it. And Oscar loved it too. So there he is. So this was initially what it looked like. Okay. And this was in November. But pretty soon after, in the spring, I started to see this. And as you know, when you have a lawn, it does take herbicide. You have to kill the weeds. And I wasn't sure if I was ready to take that on. I have a huge, it's 3,330 square feet. All the different species of weeds you can imagine, right? All of your rootarols coming up, volunteers as they call them. And this is in the spring. And so I had to decide how I was going to go about maintaining this, right? Because also the water bill was over $400 a month, just the water. That's not with electricity, gas, that's just water. So my lawn started to look like this. I started to basically let it die, and yeah, doesn't look anything like it did in November. But I had to start to wonder, do I really want a lawn? Why do we have lawns? What is their purpose? All of those questions. And so I started to think about the fact that, you know, this cartoon, you know, why are we growing this lawn? We can't eat it. And that brought me to the point of wanting to take my property and plant fruit trees, because they were going to give me sustenance, they were going to give me food, but then surround them with the California native landscape to help bring in all the pollinators and to help with pollination. And so you can see all the reasons over here, you know, contributing to water pollution, of course, with herbicides, weed and feed. And then, of course, even the nitrogen that you add with amendments is not the best, because it oftentimes will leach into the water that is running off. So it is a monoculture, sequestering less carbon than native plants. So why plant native plants? And I know that here at this meeting, in this talk, I'm absolutely preaching to the choir. But we know that they are the most responsible, ecologically responsible choice to try and mirror your surrounding landscape. And so they're suited to our local climate. They're going to be able to sustain based on the rainfall that we get here in California. Great for the soil, but also entice more of your pollinators, your birds and your butterflies, and your beneficial insects. So with those 2 pieces of knowledge, I wanted to do fruit trees. I knew I wanted to do native plants. I reached out to the turf replacement rebate program. Okay, this is the following year, September, fall of 2022, sponsored by SoCal Water Smart and the Metropolitan Water District. And here are the requirements. If you are considering this plan, you need to submit some landscape plan. You also need to submit your current water bill. Excuse me for a moment. I'm just going to grab my. So what happens when you work outside and then come to give a talk. Okay. You also need to present lawn photos. And I should mention that those lawn photos need to have lawn in them. They will not grant they will not grant you the rebate program if you send in your yard and you've already removed the lawn, because they don't know that there was lawn there to begin with, right? So there needs to be some lawn there. And then this is really important, the dimensions. I did not do as the old adage says, which is to measure twice and cut once. And when I first sent my dimensions in, I sent them in and I didn't give them a large enough area. And they calculate your rebate based on $4 per square foot. And so they calculated my rebate based on this misinformation. And it was really difficult. Several emails later, they agreed to change my rebate amount. So just, word to the wise, make sure you measure correctly. Also, you have to change out all your sprinkler heads from sprayers to all bubblers or drip. You have to include a minimum of 1 rain capture feature, and you need to plant 3 plants for every 100 square feet. Okay. And then you are given 6 months from the time that they approve your request. And so for me, that meant that my backyard project was due March of 2023. Now, if you recall, back in the winter of 2022, 2023, we actually had a lot of rain. It was a good rain year for California. And I actually had started a new job with UC Irvine, and I was doing all this commuting. And so I wasn't getting started on this project, and there was all this rain. And then it was February and there was 1 month to go. And so, oh, I forgot to, I'll come back to that thought. Just so you know, when it says to submit a landscape plan, I'm clearly not a landscape architect. Okay. I'm not going to quit my day job. However, they accepted this. And so the point being that I included what was most important to me, which was to keep my yard available for my dog to be able to get up to a full run. So I put on my landscape plan, Oscar Path 1, Oscar Path 2, Oscar Path 3. And that was the most important part of the project for me. Okay. So just keep that in mind when you approach your project, right? What is your ultimate goal? What are your objectives? I included the dimensions, 116 feet, 76 feet, 84 feet. And to the best of my ability, what I thought, of course, at the time, would be my native plants. So this was accepted. So just know that it doesn't have to be from a professional landscape architect. Okay. So as I was saying, it's February of 2023. And then I break my foot. True story. I'm taking out my Christmas tree from the holidays, which was in a pot, and I wanted to plant it in my front yard. And I went to put it in the ground and I dropped it and I broke my foot. So now I have 1 month to go. I have a broken foot. And so just so you know, I reached out to SoCal Water Smart, and they gave me an extension. They gave me a 30-day extension. They said, okay, you now have until April. Okay. So now I have an extension. And here we go. We start the project, right? So I'm collecting all these cardboard boxes from my neighbors, from my school, from the grocery store. I've got them all piled up in my garage, and I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, oh, I have so many. This is no problem. It's going to cover the whole lawn, right? Well, clearly that wasn't the case. This is all that I had. And I didn't apply any herbicide. I didn't till based on things that I had read about both those options. And now I need to go out and find some more boxes. But so actually my son suggested to me, he said, Mom, at Home Depot, they have this stuff on a roll and it's called X-board, and you can just buy it and roll it out. And I go, okay, well, clearly that's what we're going to have to do. So you can collect your cardboard from your neighbors. You can see here the $2 chuck from Trader Joe's. from one of my neighbors. But you can also go to Home Depot and you can purchase this X board, and that can, you know, supplement your project. And so I'm getting going, and this is what it's looking like initially. Cover it with mulch. Now, I did end up using over 350 bags of mulch, and you might be asking yourself, let me go back for a second because that didn't, my notes didn't come up there. So I had to make the decision, do I want to have it dumped on my driveway, right, which would probably be a little bit cheaper, or do I want to go bag by bag? And for me, with this project, it actually made more sense for me to do it a little bit at a time, you know, 40 or so bags at a time. My son would pick them up on his way home from work, throw them in the pickup truck, bring them home that weekend. I'd fit in some time. I'd try to cover the export. So it just depends on what your schedule is. And then I started doing my rain capture feature, which I mentioned is a requirement for the rebate. I luckily had a lot of rocks in my front yard that I ended up transporting from the front to the backyard. It was a lot of work. I had to dig this out, make it more of a depression. Okay. And so how come okay, I'm just gonna leave it there. Okay, so I created this swale. Okay. And like I said, all of those rocks were out front. I'll show you my two-wheeled wheelbarrow in a minute, which is was invaluable for my project. And I created my rainwater capture, which helps to allow the porous surface to take in the rain and the rain to not drain off of your property. Okay, here we are. We're making progress. I have to mention Oscar is not that happy about this whole situation. He is still finding a place to lay down on the lawn. Lots of work, lots of weekends. And then at this point, I'm ready to make his Oscar paths. So literally on my hands and knees, I spread out my mulch and start making those Oscar paths. Okay. And for that, I did have my decomposed granite delivered. I did have it dumped on the driveway. This is 7 cubic yards, okay, of decomposed granite, and then wheelbarrow from the front to the back in order to create the paths. But also, as you can see here, also creating patios with the decomposed granite. It's required by the SoCal Water Smart that all of your surfaces be covered, okay? And by the way, this whole time that I'm doing this, I, in theory, know that I'm starving the grass of the solar radiation, and that in theory, it should stop photosynthesizing, and in theory, it should die. But I have no idea if this is going to work. You know, I'm thinking that was quite a bit of grass in there. There's probably quite a bit of seed in there. Is this really going to work? But I keep going, and we lay down all of the paths, and I get to the point where, guess what? My project is due. It's April of 2023, and I have not even yet gone out and purchased all of the native plants. So good news is I reach out back to SoCal Water Smart again and tell them this, and they say, okay, we're going to give you another 30-day extension. Okay, so there is some flexibility with the program. And so now my project's due May of 2023, and actually with the help of a really nice donation from family, I'm able to go out and purchase all of these native plants. And this is one of my favorite nurseries. I'm sure you're familiar with it, the Tree of Life in San Juan Capistrano. Just so you know, they are actually closing their shop. They're closed. I know, everybody's sad, myself included. It's such a beautiful nursery. But by the end of the year, beginning of next year, I think Mike said they're going to be closing. What's great about Moose Creek Nursery, which is down in Valley Center, a little south of Fallbrook, is that you can order online from them. They will ship your native plants to your local nursery. And that's what I was able to do with a lot of mine. Here's the wheelbarrow. This was a gift from my son. and it was invaluable. I highly recommend it. 2 wheels. And then this was the very first native plant that I put in the soil. This is my manzanita. This is my Leicester Roundtree. And I'll talk a little bit about that at another slide. So I just added a few slides of the native nurseries in the different Southern California areas, but the bloomcalifornia.org is your go-to for all of those native nurseries. And those are all hyperlinked. And of course, you're going to need a helper. So my granddaughter was there to help me get this project started. She also picked out this dress for today, by the way. And there's the wheelbarrow again. And so I included this slide just to show you, I know it's very small and it's hard to see, but this is what I had to submit to the SoCal Water Smart board. And if you look down here at the bottom, total number of plants was 127. But I also purchased 100 individual grass plugs of blue grama as well. And I'll talk about how only 25 of them survived instead of 100 and why. Because if I have 3,330 square feet, I'm going to need basically at least 100 plants to satisfy the requirement. Okay. All right. So humble beginnings. Here we are getting the natives into the soil. This is a deck view from 2023. And there, you can barely see them, but they're there, all 127 of them. And then at this point, I decide I want to go out. I want to get a little bit of a hardscape. So this is the view from the swale. You can kind of see how my property slopes down. So it's at different elevations. And with hardscape, I wanted to just add some stepping stones, and also wanted to be able to separate my paths and patios from my gardens. Okay, so I start laying down those things. So this was where we were at, and I start adding up how much money I've spent on materials. It is now May of 2023, right? And my project is due. So I need to take the pictures. And by the way, you can't just send photos in of plants that are in pots. They have to be in the soil in order to qualify. So at this point, it's May of 2023. I have 2 extensions, and here is a rundown of all of the cost for the mulch, for the ram board, my decomposed granite, all of my native plants. You can see that that was the majority of the cost, okay, over $2,000. And then also the cost of, I replaced the sprinklers and also some of the patio stones. So the total cost of the materials, $4,870.44. I send all of this to SoCal Water Smart, and if they are paying at $4 per square foot, then that should bring a rebate check up to over $13,000. And in June of 2023, this came in the mail. Okay, so you can, see that, in terms of the materials and the money I invested in the materials, 4,800. So I was definitely in the black, right, in terms of that, but then my labor, right, a lot of hard work. But then with some of the money, I was able to actually purchase, I need to put a gate up. It was a busted old wood gate. And so I was able to put up this vinyl gate between my front side yard and back. And then I was also able to put up this black chain link. I did save a little patch of grass over on the north side of my property, which helps to put the dog if you need to when company visits and those types of things. So, so that was cool. So this is basically up to this point. Okay, so this is in 2023. And so the next part of the presentation, the second half of the presentation, I'm going to introduce you to the plants and where we're at today, right? In 2025, 2 years later, all the photos were taken in my yard. This is my Douglas iris, which those just bloomed recently. And so what I wanted to share with you is when you approach your project to really have a good idea about the microclimates in your yard. Because at the top of the presentation, I said, you know, I wanted to mirror my surrounding landscape, right? So that would be chaparral shrubs. I'm in Fallbrook. I'm actually one off-ramp away from Santa Margarita Ecological Reserve. That would be desert. That would also be coastal sage scrub, right? But you may have areas like I do in my yard that are more shaded and for most of the day, and that you maybe can plant some riparian species or some species that are more coastal or that require a little bit more moisture. So I did push the boundaries a little bit. Here is what my yard looks like today from the deck, from the bottom of the deck view. You can see here the deck. And my microclimates, if you take a look, I created this schematic for you to see that all of these different gardens are actually experiencing different environmental conditions, okay? If you take a look at this compass rose here, in my backyard, the sun comes up here in the east, comes over the house and sets down here in the west. And so as a result of that, most of these gardens over here on this side, here's my swale, okay? These are mostly shaded and actually just get the morning sun. So if you look at this legend, all right, the microclimate 1 is actually pretty shaded for most of the day versus microclimate 7, which is getting this really intense afternoon sun. And so keeping that in mind, all right, I'll take you around the yard. And first, let's take a look here at microclimate 1. And there's one of my Douglas iris. And I also put a little meditation area in there because it is shaded. This is someplace I can go where it'll be cool. I can sit, I can kind of become grounded and just be surrounded by my natives. You can see over here, I'll show you a better slide of that, but this is your Salvia spathacea or hummingbird sage. Here is your evergreen currant. Both of those are more oak woodland species. They do really well in the understory under the oak woodland canopy, and this is a shaded area. Okay, and so here's a better picture of the hummingbird sage, which if you know Salvia spathacea, it's so fragrant. It smells so good. So in this area, it's really fragrant. Here's another shot of that same area. This is kind of deceiving because it looks really sunny, but actually this was the lighting, which is better for the photo for the sun. So I decided to go with it. But each of my gardens will have one or more fruit trees, because remember that was my objective, right? So here I have my persimmon, which is the persimmon, it's the acorn-shaped persimmon, not the type that you bite like an apple, but you scoop out the pulp and make your breads and things. I had one on my Riverside home and I really miss it. And then you have, I put currants in there. These two species, Baccharis and golden bush, they're more riparian species, right? So they need a little bit more moisture. Yeah, so that's a little bit about this area. And this is just to show you that I had different varieties of poppies. The moon glow poppy also put a lupin in. I don't know if you have trouble with lupin, but it seems like they must taste really well to the little critters because the leaves just seem to disappear. Okay, microclimate 2, moving right along. Another area I call my island garden. I call it my island garden because most of these species are actually native to the Channel Islands. So like I said, I was kind of pushing the boundary a little bit, not just putting in coastal sage scrub and chaparral, but because these are shaded areas, I went with the island morning glory. This is the cultivar Anacapa pink from Catalina, and the Santa Cruz Island buckwheat. And my tree here isn't a fruit tree, but it's the toyon. It hasn't blossomed yet or fruited. So I'm really hoping, because it just went through a growth spurt. I feel like it needed more sun. I feel like it's in an area that it could have been doing, but it's starting to take off now this spring. Okay, so I'm looking forward to that. It's kind of a sentimental species because that was actually um, the first leaves that I processed for heat tolerance and drought tolerance were from the Toyon. So, and then this is another view. So I have the island snapdragon. Again, because this is a shaded area, just know that if you plant this in a more with more sun, you will get more blooms. But I'm not getting very many blooms because it is in a more shaded area. Of course, narrow leaf milkweed for my monarchs to munch on, and Rosa californica. And then if we move on to microclimate 3, you can see my scarlet bugler here and my Yankee Point. Some of these aren't too visible because, like I said, some of my species are 2 years old and some of my species are babies. So I'm kind of having a hard time with irrigation as a result of that because, as you know, the babies really need to be babied and they need the water, whereas the older ones, you know, are more established. So I'm still working out my irrigation. Okay, let's move on. And then here, I wanted to point out the blue grama. I mentioned that I initially purchased 100 of the blue grama because I had the idea that in the first microclimate I showed you where it was all shaded, I could put those little grasses and it would kind of look like a meadow. Well, grasses need sun. And they need a lot of sun. So nothing happened there. They all died out. And the rest of the blue grama went here, which looks really nice. It's starting to fill in. But you can even see here the difference between this one and this one, because this one doesn't get the sun. Okay. So just again, remember that they do really nice when they put out their little eyelash inflorescence. It's quite pretty. Okay. This microclimate here is getting direct morning sun, but mostly afternoon shade. My 2 fruit trees here, I have a dwarf Valencia orange and I have a Kishu mandarin. This was actually gifted to me from UCR. And just surrounded it with some ground cover like silver carpet aster, which flowers like this, and California fuchsia around my mandarin, which gives off, of course, you know, the tubular flower. And then going down this microclimate, I have another bunch grass, the Fiesta marigold monkey flower, and then bee blossom, or is it Gara? I think Gara is the common name, that flowers like this. Yeah. And when you go to the native nursery, this is actually not a California native, but they'll say on there where it's native from, which I think is probably New Mexico. But you'll usually see this at the native nursery. Okay, so microclimate 5, I call Sage Hill. And Sage Hill is getting morning sun, but it's also getting some afternoon sun as well. It's complete with the sage whisperer, of course, because sometimes that's what he looks like, just whispering into the sage. It also is the place where when the sun comes up in the morning in the east, this little stool here, I can sit and drink my coffee, give the sun salutation. And so it's a nice place to be surrounded again by the fragrance and the smells of the chaparral with my sage. And I have a skylark mountain lilac, so I have a ceanothus there. And we'll talk a little bit about this cultivar of sage. I'm really pleased with the jade carpet. So if you're looking for a Salvia mellifera, a black sage to use, and you don't want it to get the wild type, because the wild type is just that, it's wild. It's not going to have such a nice prostrate growth form, okay? I would really recommend jade carpet. What it's doing here is it's surrounding my 2 fruit trees. So I have a bacon avocado and a gem hass. And just really briefly, just to explain, because avocados have a really interesting pollination story. They sometimes you'll hear people say that they're either male or female. That's not entirely true. Avocado trees are actually monoecious. They have both male flowers and female flowers on the same tree. But what's interesting is that, so this is pollinator type A and this is pollinator type B. So the has will actually, the female flowers will open in the morning. Okay, so they're ready to receive pollen. And over here with the bacon, which is pollinator type B, the male flowers open in the morning. So they're ready to give the pollen. And so it just encourages cross-pollination when you do plant a pollinator B with a pollinator A. But they don't look really they don't look great in this photo. They've actually come back to life and they're doing well. They haven't fruited yet. They've flowered twice. Okay. I'm really hoping that they start, and I'm completely open and receptive to anybody that grows avocados. And I live in Fallbrook, okay? So I need to have some avocados. Okay, so the jade carpet's great. And then of course, white sage. And I sit here, so I wanted just a little daisy, you know, a little annual. This is actually a perennial, but it's herbaceous, and this is, hopefully it does well. Doing well so far. Okay. Now we get into the gardens where I had to think about intense afternoon sun. Here is my fruit tree, red Malaysian guava. It has already flowered and fruited. Super, super fragrant, really, really tasty. I killed 2 of these. This is the 3rd one. It's doing really well. So it really is doing well in this spot with the amount of light, with the amount of water and everything. So fingers crossed, because I really like the coffee berry and I really wanted to have one. This is the other end of that garden with a bunch grass. I have Dudleas. I have a lance leaf forever. I have a fingertip. My fruit tree here is the Tango Mandarin. If you didn't know, this was actually created at UCR back in 2011 by scientists in the botany department. Pretty cool. And then in the middle here, you can see how I planted my manzanita. I planted it up on a mound of decomposed granite. And the reason I did that was I was taking the suggestion from the person at Tree of Life Nursery, because when you go there, they have this Lester Roundtree manzanita. It's decades old, right as you walk in, and they have it up on a mound of DG. And they said, that's how you should plant it. So I said, okay. And it's doing well. It has, as you can see here, it has flowered and fruited. Don't you just love these little pink urn-shaped flowers? They're so cute. And it has produced berries. They're edible, if you didn't know. And it is growing, so happy about that. And then with my Dudleya, my chalk Dudleya, I just wanted to show that I wanted to plant it to mirror its natural setting, which is, of course, on the rock face of cliffs, right? Coastally, and also at an angle to prevent the water from pooling, right? Okay, so that was why, that was the rationale for that. The chamise that I chose was a cultivar that it was selected for the garden. So it's not the wild type. It's very slow growing, but it is going to get pretty big. And as you can see in this garden, things are getting crowded. So I've already been pruning quite a bit, and I can see which shrubs are responding to pruning better than others. But it's looking nice. So I wanted to show you a little bit about tiering in your garden. So when you tier, you know, here this margarita bop, this penstemon is only grows to be, I'm going to take a drink. Okay. Only grows to be about 1.5 feet or so. But then, of course, behind it, you have your bush sunflower. It hadn't bloomed yet when I took this photo for this presentation. So this is taken from last year. So another good takeaway from this photo is complementary colors. My friend Ray taught me that. So you see these gorgeous purple magenta blooms against the yellow Asteraceae daisy there, the sunflower. And okay, I thought I would include this photo just to say that gardening, as you I'm sure all know and agree with me, that is so good for your mental health. So when you're out in the yard and you're able to just basically empty your head and you can stop thinking about all the day-to-day things that like paying bills and all of those lovely things that you have to think about, you become creative. You get into a flow state. And one day I decided I wanted to have some yard art. And so I went around and refurbished some old pots. And this is actually, where's my cursor? Well, yeah, there it is. This is actually a piece of a broken fireplace screen. And I really agree with the sign. So if you have time for drama, you should probably garden more. And yeah, so it's just a really great place. It's a great place and it's really great for your mental health. So this is in my garden here. I have a kumquat. I'm really excited about this one. It's supposed to be a little sweeter than the more oval shaped kumquat. And I put another species of sage, again, bring in the pollinators. My pink lady apple is surviving. It's not thriving. I'm hoping it comes back. So fingers crossed on that. And then I really like this one. So if you're looking for a shrub that's going to do really well in the intense afternoon heat, and responds well to pruning, and it's really floriferous, it has lots of blooms, I would really suggest Palmer's Indian Mallow. It has those velvety leaves and light colored leaves, so it's really good at reflecting the light. I've pruned it a couple times and it's just perfect in that spot. The silver linings I chose is actually a cultivar of Condea emerai, which is desert lavender. And I kind of wish I would have went with the wild type instead of this cultivar, because the cultivar, as you can see in this picture, is really sparse. Okay, there's not as many shoots. It's not as full of a shrub, but they recommended it to me at the nursery because I thought it would do better in this high heat, high light environment. And it does, and it's still very pretty. And it has that really nice lavender smell. Okay. Here is a look at, I like this photo because it kind of tears for you. If you didn't notice, my property is actually surrounded by a tree line for privacy, and it's just your wax leaf privet, okay, that the previous owner had put in and had pruned. But it makes a really nice backdrop for all of the California natives. So I have my improved Meyer lemon, another Palmer's, excuse me, Indian mallow, coyote mint, for the ground cover. And then I really am really pleased with my snow flurry ceanothus, because we love ceanothus, we love the mountain lilac, right? But it's kind of nice that it's this different bloom, right? So the snow flurry is doing really well. And if we take a look, different path down that same garden, I have a couple bunch grasses. And then to finish out the ground cover here, I have the golden aster. I have another Ceanothus thyrsophloris. And then at the end, of course, Encilia farinosa, the brittle bush, or freeway daisy, as they're called. This was a really great performer when I studied the drought and the heat tolerance. The brittle bush actually initially has green leaves, but in response to the summer, then the leaves actually change to a lighter color and enable to reflect more light. My Santa Rosa plum is doing well. This is actually taken before it really started leafing out and blossoming. I was really nervous because I pruned it for the first time. And when it was still just, branches, I was just you know, it's like a watched pot never boils, right? So a watched plant will never bloom, you know, so I really glad that it came back. I also have the Mexican lime. You can kind of see, you'll see in this garden, I really like this photo again, just to hit on the whole idea of planting complementary colors with the orange apricot blossoms versus the blue, okay, for the Patrick's Point. And this garden gets really direct afternoon sun. So if you look at these photos and compare left to right, you can really see this is the morning and this is the afternoon. So I did put a bladder pot in, basically on the recommendation of somebody else who gave a talk a few months ago. And I think I gave it enough room because I saw how big it's going to get. And I also have the pineapple guava here surrounded by bees bliss. So lots of bees coming in there. And then for my chaparral mallow, I'm actually pruning it more like a tree. And I'm still kind of figuring that out because as you know, that can get very large. And then I also have my pomegranate. So though that was a little tour around the garden. And so I thought, like I said at the top of the show, I like to go around and take photos of all the pollinators. So I just wanted to just pick a few select ones. This, of course, is a fiery skipper, pretty common. I like the honeybee on my Yankee Point because you can see its little pollen basket right there, which is pretty cool.
Take it with your phone?
This is all of my phone. I have an Android, by the way, Samsung. Yeah, so look at this one. So this is my snow flurry ceanothus. And this guy here, this is a black-tailed bumblebee. So this really brings in those. This has a little orange rump. And then this is my favorite butterfly. She visits me almost daily. This is the morning cloak butterfly. I also see a lot of great or giant swallowtails because of the citrus. So they bring in, turns out they lay their eggs on the leaves of the citrus. They develop into the larva, and the larva looks basically like bird poop. So it's a example of mimicry. So it protects the larva from being preyed upon. And then I have, of course, excuse me, my monarch caterpillar munching on my woolly leaf milkweed, which changes to the adult, drinking the nectar from my bush sunflower. And this is a buckeye. So these are all taken in my yard. I have some other friends. The hooded Oreo, the mourning dove. I tend to get different species of fungi popping up, and that actually speaks to, I think, the difference in climate between Riverside, San Bernardino, and Fallbrook, because I lived in Riverside and I never really saw the same fungi popping up in my yard in Riverside. I think it's just too dry. But as you travel south to Fallbrook, we take a west towards the coast. So it's going to be a little more humid and a little more mesic for you. And then, of course, my chorus frog. So to summarize, I just put a few points that some takeaways from the presentation. Always good idea not to plant before summer, but because of the timing of my project, that's exactly what I was doing, is I was putting my natives down in May, and that was right before the intense summer heat. And that was the bad thing, okay? Also, it is true what they say, okay? Flannel bush does die from summer water, and I'm here to tell you because I did it. I don't know how that happens. I'm not sure. Maybe if you want to chat about that. But it was doing beautifully, got some summer water, and next thing I knew, it was gone. Same thing with my sugar bush. Okay. Sometimes you'll have to move your natives. Initially, when I started the project, I thought I would plant my sages, my white sage and my black sage, in my garden area that gets the direct afternoon sun. No, they didn't. They actually were surviving, but they weren't thriving. And they did much better in the garden that had less sun, just morning sun, a little bit of afternoon sun. So I did a lot of transplanting. This is just my own anecdotal observation is that when I go to a nursery, you're going to be tempted to buy the plant that or has already bloomed, but it's probably a better idea to buy the one that's still in the vegetative growth, just because they get to know your yard better that way. And then they can grow and they can to reproductive while they're in your yard. Just again, don't, quote me on that. That's just something that I think I've noticed, observed. I already said this. Not everyone will get your project. What I mean by that is when, for example, I would tell somebody I was doing a turf replacement with California natives, and their response would be, "Oh, I know, I love succulents too." So yeah, so I mean, I love succulents too. I have my Dudleya and everything, but it's not a xeriscape, right? And so, and that's okay, and that's fine. So just know that, everybody won't exactly get it. That's okay. As long as you get it, that's all that matters, right? So, I have a couple questions of what's going on with my yard right now, because full disclosure, the lawn is not dead. It is hanging on. And what I mean by that, especially since it's spring, is I have lots of grass coming up. So I'm pulling out grass plugs all the time, los manos, okay, all the time. And I think that I'm going to have to go through a transition period where under the soil, which we can't see, that the roots of the lawn are still they're still there. There was a lot of seed there. Okay, there was a lot of seed there. And the roots of the lawn are still going to be in competition with the roots of my fruit trees and my natives. And it's going to take some time for those root systems to win out. And so I will take your suggestions if you have any, but that's kind of where we're at. I don't want to sugarcoat and say the lawn is gone, and it's not.
Can I ask you, and you should repeat the question after I say it for the people on the.
Oh, okay, sure.
Can I ask you what kind of grass?
Yeah, it's probably it's a fescue. Yeah, it's a fescue. That's a really good question, because I really never researched exactly which fescue it was. I was actually thinking about bringing it in to show you the evidence.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I will say, for Bermuda, which is why I would cardboard, I would usually leave that cardboard or mulch paper in place for 2 to 3 months, hopefully in summer.
Okay, that would make sense, because that would completely concentrate the heat under there too, right?
You're not looking to do that. You're just looking to exclude light.
Exclude light. Okay.
So
Well,
you should repeat that for the.
okay, yeah. I was being asked for those that are watching online about what species of grass, if I knew what species of grass it was. And I said, I do know that it's fescue, as you heard, but also if it was Bermuda, that it's recommended that you actually keep the cardboard on there for a few months to really exclude the light and to get to the phase that you want in your grass, right? Okay. Thank you, Orchid. So again, the turf lawn is still making appearances. My water bill is cut in half. Okay, so I definitely am not paying. I can't seem to get it much under 200. It's like 180. Fallbrook is changing the water provider actually, so we're hoping to see how that plays out on the bill. And really, Mother Nature, as you know, has her own timetable, right? And in this world that we live in, which is very fast-paced and very immediate gratification with technology, it's just really nice that when you go into your garden, it's not going to happen right away. And maybe you're not buying that winner at the local nursery that has been selected to do really well in your yard, and it's not going to be beautiful bougainvillea right away or anything like that, but enjoy the ride, right? it's your baby and you can do whatever you want with it. It's a blank canvas, right? And so to conclude, I just want to show you where I was at here, excuse me, when I moved in. And then 2 years into my native landscape, when I look out the deck at that same point, I look out and I see this. And for me, that is, makes my heart sing, right? Yeah. So, and of course, actually, what really matters, to be honest, is that Oscar is now completely on board. He's completely on board with California natives. He didn't know in the beginning, the jury was out, but he's completely on board now. He thinks they're pretty cool, as you can see. And now we've come to the interactive part of the presentation. So if you're asleep, you need to wake up. So if anybody's asleep out there.
was supposed to wake you up.
So, so all you have to do, I know my son-in-law, you're going to participate, right? Okay, Mike, you're going to participate? Yes? Okay, cool. So all you have to do is you just have to, when you hear the word world, you just need to yell out the word lawn. Okay? Can you guys think you can do that? Even you watching at home, right? Okay. Not sure, we hadn't tried out the sound, but let's give it a go. Thanks to my daughter for providing the music clip. All right.
What are the speakers? What is it going to play out of? We'll go find out. I hope.
Oh, it didn't work. Okay. So what I can do, no biggie. Let's just go like this.
Options on the top.
And we're going to go like this. Oh,
Click the thing on the very right on the bottom. Yeah, that bottom one on, see a little.
Oh, right
yeah,
there.
That sound output.
here we go.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Should we try again?
Good try.
All right.
You might have to click it on the Zoom program as well. If you mouse over the very top where it says you are screen sharing.
It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world. It's the end of the world.
Good job. You guys did great. I want you to be my students. All right, so thank you. And that is the end of the presentation.
Great. That was a wonderful presentation, Denise. Thank you so much for sharing that. Impressive. All the work that you did is amazing. It's really beautiful. I live in the desert, so I'm really jealous of all the plant choices that you have over there in Fallbrook. We have some beautiful ones as well. So I'm going to ask folks, if you have a question, would you put that into the Q&A as opposed to the chat? That just makes it easier. So go ahead, if you do have questions, to put them in the Q&A. Those of you who have put questions in the chat, I'll ask those for Denise as well. So starting out, Denise, with our first question, Kathleen asks if we can get a list of the nurseries that you mentioned.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I have my email there, right?
You go back to that slide.
Sure,
I
slideshow
think
from
that would
current
help
slide.
people. And the people in the room too.
Yes, of course. So feel free to reach out via my email. I will tell you that I said that one of the great things is that Moosa Creek Nursery, you can order them online and then they'll actually send them to your local nursery that's close to you. And that was really helpful because obviously I had a lot to buy. My very first haul was at San Juan Capistrano at the Tree of Life Nursery. But you can only haul so many, right? So yeah, absolutely. And I will say that sometimes you'll go to a nursery like say Louis in Riverside, and sometimes they will have a very small area of California natives. You won't find them at Home Depot. You won't find them at Lowe's for the most part. But for example, Armstrong's, which is in Temecula, they do have a small area with California natives. But my favorite were definitely Tree of Life in San Juan Capistrano, and then a little south of me in Encinitas is Neil's Nursery. And she's really great. It's just this really small corner nursery in Encinitas. And the great thing about that one is right next door is Panikin, which is an awesome coffee shop. So, you know, yeah.
Okay, another question. Did you cut holes in the cardboard when you planted your plants?
Oh, cut holes in the cardboard. Yeah. So, gosh, I'm going back. So yeah, so definitely I just went all the way through down to the soil. Once I got the mulch on there, once I had the plant and I dug out the hole to plant the plant, yes, it was definitely a hole through the cardboard.
Great. And then there's a question from, or Steve actually is mentioning, are you a member of the Homegrown National Park website, as he's cited in the chat?
Homegrown National Park.
Sounds like you should apply. Homegrown, it's all one word, Homegrown National Park.org.
Okay. Will I get a copy of this transcript with all of the questions to go back and take a look at?
Yeah, I can get that for you, Denise.
Okay.
I think there's a way, I'm not sure if there's an easy way for you to get the questions from the chat, but we'll have a recording that we'll post, and I can also send you the transcript.
Get the chat.
Okay, Orchid has said that, yes, that I will be able to access the questions from the chat.
I think that's right. I was just going to say Orchid will know for sure. Okay, so next question, let's see. Drew is asking, if you aren't able to do all the work, where's the best place to look for help that would understand your project? Looks like Arlie's typing an answer, but go ahead, Denise.
Sure. Isn't that why we have kids? Just saying. Yeah, my son was help for me, and that's a great question. Depending on your landscaper, or if you reach out to somebody who does landscaping for a living, it just varies greatly, their knowledge of California native landscape. It varies greatly. So I actually do have a personal friend, Scotty Kuwahara, he owns his own company. So I'll give him a little plug, Pacific Crest Landscape. And Scotty actually does have a pretty good knowledge of California natives. I initially went to him when I started the project and I said, here's what I want to do. And actually he said, good luck. But he does have knowledge. That wasn't the case with everybody I spoke with. Okay. So, you know, we have, like I said, the winners at the nurseries that are typical landscape residential plants that are used, and they're beautiful. And I think you find that most landscape professionals are only mostly well-versed in those. But I will make a plug for Scotty. So Pacific Crest Landscape is the name of his company. Yeah.
The water companies have wonderful websites that will take you from the very beginning of a project
Okay.
to the very
Thank
end.
you.
And there's both Eastern and Western have downloadable books per se that are, you know, free to download, and will take you through everything, including suggested plants, things about mulch, soil, everything.
So let me repeat that answer because this could be very helpful. So I was just shared with me that both the Eastern and the Western water municipal departments websites have resources for help with landscaping your project from beginning to end, including books. So that would be actually a really good place to start. When I went to to do this project, I was, you know, YouTubing videos and things like that. And of course, a lot of them went back to those two organizations.
And you
So-
can get free mulch sometimes from them, like my water company right now is giving away free mulch. So
Oh,
I
that's,
have an STD, so it's like I just put it in all these tubs and like one trash can, and I've been there like 3 or 4 times filling them up and dumping them. And I plan on going back next week too, if they
That's
still
very
have
cool.
it.
Wet Water Company?
This is the East Valley Water Company
Okay.
in Highland.
Okay.
But I know like on Earth Day or Arbor Day,
Mm-hmm.
do the research for your city, or your surrounding cities. A lot of them give away free mulch.
It's tomorrow, right? Wednesday?
Yeah, Earth Day.
Yeah,
So
so
I'll repeat that.
I mean, the trash companies have to get rid of it somehow, and so a lot of times they're just donating it to these cities that give it away to residents.
Sure. Okay. So apparently, so we can get free mulch, right? From your local water company, if you can do the research. This one was, I'm sorry, repeat again.
It's called East Valley Water District.
East
in-
Valley Water
in
District,
Highland.
which is in Highland. And so that would definitely cut on the cost for the mulch, and that would be a great, resource. Thank you.
Also, I buy like the yarrow. You can buy, yarrow is also native. You can buy the little 4-inch pots, but I found that if I bought a 1 gallon, I could take that 1 gallon and divide it up into 6 plants.
Sure.
Because it divides very
It does.
easily.
Yarrow does divide easily. Yes.
Yeah, and then you continue to just divide it, and that way you don't have to keep, it saves money.
Okay. So that was another helpful hint if you are wanting to put down yarrow into your soil to buy the 1 gallon and divide it, and it'll go further that way. Thank you.
Denise, there's a question from Rachel Romano. She said, hi, Denise. She loved learning so much, especially since I'm a transplanted East Coaster. She misses a lot of what she grew there, both native and cultivated. It's great to see lupin, and I think the question is, could I grow lilacs here?
Well, that's a good question. So as far as lilacs, would anybody here like to comment on that?
It's a high water use plant.
It reminds me of hydrangea in terms of
Yes.
like, it's a high water use plant, so you definitely would have to have an area that was more like a total shade area, something that could stay very mesic and very moist.
We'll mostly grow it at elevation.
Okay, and mostly at elevation,
Yeah,
so.
UCR, at least in the past, had developed some varieties that will bloom in Riverside area. But I never had any luck growing them in my yard in Moreno Valley. They would die after a while. I think it's because they were getting too much sun and not enough water.
Okay, Ray, so what Jan just told me is that there were some varieties developed at UCR, and she tried them, but she didn't have much luck with them. And then there's a couple other people here that want to chime in, so go ahead.
So I grew one. I don't remember the variety, but it took years to get kind of established and really bloom.
Okay.
It doesn't do it as much as what you would see, up in the mountains.
Up
But
at
it
elevation.
did survive. I had it in the sun, but then I moved, so I couldn't take it with me. But it
Okay.
took years. I want to say 7-10 years.
Okay, so another one of the audience members just shared with me that she did put one in the soil, Ray, and that it actually took somewhere around 7 to 10 years to really bloom and thrive. What I'm hearing is they do better at higher elevation, but I also want to point out to the audience and those of you watching at home is that, Ray, you have a beautiful desert garden, and she's made this gorgeous garden, mostly Cactaceae species, but I understand you're from Maine, so she misses, the species that are more accustomed to a wetter climate. So thanks for the question, Ray.
Let's see, I have a couple more questions or comments coming out of the chat. There was a mention that it takes 2 to 3 months with cardboard and mulch or mulch paper to kill Bermuda. I also want to mention with a reminder from Arlie that you can use Calscape, which is a really great website hosted by CNPS. That is a really good place to find nurseries. You can put in your zip code and it will give you a list of nurseries in your area that carry native plants. That's calscape.org. Someone mentioned, Linda Richards mentions that in the Redlands Beaumont area, the Cherry Valley Nursery in Cherry Valley has a nice selection of natives and is committed to carrying them. And then there's another question: if I cover my grass, will I starve my lizards?
So I'm not a herpetologist. Are there any herpetologists in the room?
You know, I can answer that, Denise. My
Sure.
husband is a herpetologist.
I was just gonna say,
We-
isn't Dr. Barrows?
Yes.
You know, yeah, that's what I thought.
So we garden for lizards. I can say actually that lawn would probably be less of a good habitat for lizards than what Denise is showing with native plants, and especially lots of piles of rocks, because lizards need cover so they don't get eaten by all the predatory birds and other critters that are around. I'm in the desert and we have road runners that will literally wipe out the local lizard population. So I think you would do really well for the lizards by having a landscape that looks like Denise with plants that provide cover. That also encourages a lot more insect diversity for the carnivorous lizards, and definitely rocks are a huge benefit. It's amazing what rocks will do to your landscape in terms of wildlife, not just lizards, but small mammals and even snakes that will hide out in the rocks. So I think you'll do much better. You'll have more lizards when you convert to Denise's landscape model.
And definitely have lots of lizards.
I have lots of lizards, believe me, because I have a lizard hunter. My four-legged friend. And I just want to piggyback on what you said about calscape.org, because when I use that every day, and I should have thought when the question was about the nurseries, because when I'm out and I'm at a nursery and I'm looking at the native, I'm on my phone on calscape.org because it tells me the natural setting, it tells me the growing conditions, it tells me the lighting conditions, and it tells me, you know, how big it's going to get, and, you know, and so forth. So it is invaluable, that website, for me. Yeah, absolutely. And then of course, if you're at home, you can look and see what nurseries carry that species.
There's also a nursery nearby here. It's in Claremont, probably a little closer than
The Rancho Botanic Garden.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
called Grow Native Nursery.
Okay.
And it's adjacent to
the Rancho
Botanic Garden.
Or it used to be
Yeah.
called that. Now it's just called
It's
California
California
Botanic Garden. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so the Grow Native Nursery is just native plants in Claremont.
Okay. I
That would-
actually don't been there. Yeah.
Those
Also,
should be, that one should definitely be on Calscape if folks wanted information about it.
Okay.
Or their website. They have a website, California Botanic Garden. I have one more question from Carolyn. Can you tell me more about planting and watering flannel bush? Another part is how far from a thirsty shade plant must the flannel bush be located?
Oh, well, you know, I killed it. So basically my flannel bush was doing really well. And it was blooming and everything. And they told me when I took it from Tree of Life Nursery about the summer water. And then it was in the same garden, it was getting water. So as far as your question, you know, what's the proximity? How far does it have to be away? I'm not sure how to answer that yet because I haven't been successful with it. And I'm supposed maybe somebody in here could add to that. But one thing I did find out, because I was curious, why would it get so shocked, right, from water? And I was told, one of the nursery owners was explaining to me that has to do with the temperature gradient between how hot it is outside and how hot the soil is. And then when it hits the water, there's this gradient, you know, difference of temperature, and it just shocks the plant. So that's why it happens. So that's what I was told. And again, you know, if anybody else wants to add to that, did you want to add to that?
I would say that most native plants don't like hot, wet roots.
Mhm.
And actually will
Yeah.
put rocks on the south side of the root ball of the plant
Mm,
when we're planting in May or June. And hot, wet roots are just basically a recipe for fungus, just like a hot, wet shower is. And sadly not the beneficial fungi. But
mhm.
mostly it is possible if you have really sharp drainage to water
Okay,
flannel bushes, but it can't be at the rate that you water the rest of your lawn.
okay. So what I'm hearing here is it's the hot, wet roots the plant doesn't like, which is a breeding ground for your microbes, your fungi, not necessarily the good ones, the mycorrhizal fungi, but the ones that will be detrimental to your plant. So it's root rot, basically, is what's going on with that situation. And it's a great question, and I think that it would take, you would actually have to be successful with the flannel bush in order to answer how it was working for you. And unfortunately, I'm not at that point, but thank you. And there was a question, should we answer some from the room?
Yes.
Okay. In the back with the blue jacket? Yeah.
Are you using bubblers or
Mm.
a drip system?
Great.
Get that point.
Yeah, great question. I changed out my sprinklers for the rebate, right? I'm actually doing quite a bit of hand watering. I'm going to be honest. And the reason why is because I have so much going on because I have babies, right? And they're going to need a little bit more water. Then I have these mature natives that could have used less. And then I have fruit trees, which depending on the fruit tree can really require, like an avocado can really need quite a bit of water. So to be honest, I'm trying to figure it out. I'm in a place where I'm hoping that the irrigation plan will, develop as all of the natives grow and all the fruit trees grow, and I can really address it. But, one of my friends asked me the same question, and I said, well, I'm doing a lot of hand watering. And he said, well, retired people do that. I said, well, I'm semi-retired. So, don't really have a definite plan on the irrigation. I don't have a drip system. Okay. Yeah.
Just a quick question, because you were saying you still have your cardboard down, but you're still getting grass. So where is your grass coming up?
Well, because the cardboard ultimately biodegrades, right? So after
yeah.
2 years, it's going to
Yeah,
be
so
working
it's
down into the
biodegradable.
soil. There was enough seed in there, and now here it comes,
Makes sense.
It could be just the roots too, but I don't know, it's probably a little both.
It might have helped to get a sod cutter and cut it out,
A saw cutter,
a sod cutter.
a sod cutter,
And
got
then
it.
cut your long lawn, you probably get some root and then take that to the dump or something.
Okay,
And then do the cardboard.
okay.
That might, I don't know, because everyone I know, like in the commercial land.
Commercial does that. I know. And I think, at this point I haven't, and, but
Yeah, I know.
yeah. So it was mentioned in the room that a sod cutter could be helpful prior to laying down the cardboard in terms of, uh, getting the roots to be abbreviated as much as possible, or at least the shoots, right? Yes.
When you were requesting your first extension, did you have to send the water company like an x-ray of your broken foot?
Actually, to be honest, I didn't send an x-ray, but I sent him a photo
Yeah.
of my boot, just to make sure that, they believed me.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, lots of emails.
Lots of emails. So how long total did you end up having with the 2 extensions? Because it was a 6-month originally, right?
Right, I ended up having 8 months.
Okay.
8 months. Yes, ma'am.
Not necessarily in this area down south, But in the San Fernando Valley, in Sun Valley, is Theodore Payne Foundation.
Yeah,
Native Nursery, and I
Right.
did not notice that on your list.
I know.
But that is a marvelous place and they have lots of great information. If you say, what is your area? They'll say, these are the best. It's a wonderful place to go to.
And that's in the San Fernando.
San Fernando Valley. and
San Fernando Valley.
Specifically. So if you're going up the 210, you go through Pasadena,
Mhm.
Glendale, Burbank,
Mhm.
and then Sun Valley. And it's just this side of some of the Hunga Canyon.
Okay, so it was recommended if you're in the area of Sun Valley, San Fernando Valley, to visit Theodore Payne Foundation.
It's Payne.
Theodore Payne is spelled Payne.
It's a great website.
It is.
Did
Yeah.
they want you to go back to those slides that have the lists for the Zoom audience? For the list of nurseries?
Perhaps.
We did one. Thank you.
It was a good segue for that, so.
That's actually towards the beginning. I'll just, that's in the first half. Okay. Yeah, so I had 3 slides here. And I think I probably took this from bloomcalifornia.org.
The asterisks.
Oh, those are ones that I used. The ones that are starred were my favorite.
I just want to mention that Parkview
Mm.
here in Riverside.
They do have natives. Yeah.
Yes, they carry them all year round. And they also have a very good selection from Moosa Creek,
Yes.
but they're also a spot that you can go and order
Yes.
from Moosa Creek and pick up. things.
Yes. Good point. Good point. Because here in town, excuse me, in Riverside, Parkview Nursery, who actually the owner, I went to high school with, so I know this. They do definitely have natives. There's a Parkview on Jackson. There's a Parkview on Chicago. And they order from Moosa Creek, and you can order from Van. Brandon is the owner, so you can order from Van. You can tell him Denise sent you, and he will get those for you. Yeah, thank you for reminding me. I forgot about that.
Any other questions?
Denise, if there's not questions from the room, I wanted to mention a comment that Drew made. It's not really a question, but I think it's an important point. There was a comment from Rosie, the concern about this approach is the 4 months when the ground is covered. And Drew said he would be concerned that his HOA might object to that. And I know HOAs can be a challenge when trying to convert to native landscape. Do you have any suggestions?
Good point. About HOAs, I don't live in an HOA, so I wasn't, and plus it was in my backyard. So I think I will defer to anyone here who has experienced that, if they have any suggestions.
So there is, you may not know that there's a rule that you can have solar panels, whether your HOA is happy about it or not.
Okay.
And there is a similar, rule that you can have a native plant garden, whether your HOA is happy about it or not. They can ask you for a planting plant, but they can't say no native.
Okay, so I was just informed that the HOA cannot ban you from having a native landscape. Is there some place that they should go online to see where is that legislation
It's
or?
legislation.
Okay, so it is actual legislation. So I guess know that you have the backing of the law in your right to a native landscape in your front yard, regardless of your HOA. Yes?
Yeah,
Denise,
they
I had a, oh,
make a
I'm sorry.
planting plan.
I'm sorry.
They can require a planting. plan.
Okay, the HOA can require you to submit a planting plan.
Mhm. I was
But
just gonna, this is Katie online. I was gonna just mention, this is actually a story from a friend. I'm out in the desert, so he was cited by his HOA to trim his palm trees. And he said, I'm not going to trim my palm trees because palm trees, when they are the native California fan palm, create a lot of important wildlife habitat with the fronds staying on the trunks. He said, I'm not going to do that. And if you want me to, I'll tell you why. And he actually ended up doing a presentation to his HOA about the benefits in leaving the palm fronds on the trunk so that they create those nest sites and places for critters. And then he ended up, after that, the general manager asked him to do a presentation on sort of the Coachella, the desert ecosystem. And he put together a whole presentation with many of the same kinds of elements that you talked about, of the sort of benefits of having native plants. I think he spoke to the group for about an hour. And I guess what it sounded like what came out of that was people started to realize the benefits and, talking about insects and pollinators and all those different things. So that might be, we're actually working on trying to look at having some outreach to HOAs here in the desert to try to go around and do presentations like that. So that might be a possibility, is to help them to understand why you would be making that change.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's a great story. Actually, education is power, right? And so when you share that knowledge, people just don't know. People aren't maybe aware. But as soon as you share that knowledge, hey, this California fan palm, all of this that, you normally see taken off, this is home to all of this wildlife. Then they become educated, and with that education, that can change policy and it can change minds. And so I agree 100%, that with HOAs, maybe what they need is just to have a local neighborhood, soapbox, so to speak, type of, awareness.
Yeah, I think in the case of the fan palms, he was focusing on talking about owls that eat rats and, having bats that eat mosquitoes and all those kinds of things. But I also think he didn't end up having to pay the fine for his palm trees. So lots of
there's that too. So
yeah,
good for the pocketbook.
There we go.
This is Arlie. I would just like to mention that in high fire severity zones, though, keeping the skirts on the non-native fan palm is not a good idea.
I'll repeat that maybe for the audience here.
Yeah, I don't. So if you can maybe mention that. So in different places you might keep your skirts and other places not.
Did you hear what she said? High fire zones. It's actually not a good idea to keep the skirts on the California fan palms.
Well, mostly it's mostly the Mexican fan palm that people plant around here. The big, tall Washingtonia robusta.
The robusta. Okay,
yeah,
not the filiform.
And so some people plant fallifera, but still, you probably don't want a big skirt on your fallifera if you're in a high fire severity zone.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, I was specifically talking about the desert area.
Okay, for the desert. So, yeah.
Okay, are there any more questions? Doesn't look like it. So.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I enjoyed it. Feel free to reach out, email.
Do we need to say anything being here?
Yeah, you should, the people on Zoom.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in on Zoom. This presentation was recorded and will be available
On our YouTube channel.
In a few days. So look out for that if you wanted to go back and look at things again. And can you stop it on the slides to get all the nursery names and stuff?
It was on there.
It's already on there. So
they had it for quite some time.
Yeah. Yeah, so, and then remember next month in May, our meeting will start at 11 rather than at 10. And will be a very interesting program with our state conservation chair. So
Will that be in this room?
yes, that will be in this room. So, and is that one going to be on Zoom too?
Yes.
And it will be on Zoom. So that's all. I guess we'll end the Zoom period. Thank you all for attending. We're doing